the independence of our country. At the very outset, I would like to mention that I'm not going to restrict myself to this Independence Day, because it's not something, as the previous speaker said, to be merely remembered every year. There is much more to be achieved. The preceding speaker, the Venerable Monk, made a very effective contribution to today's event. I'm really grateful that we have had such a distinguished director of a very respected institute to be our guest speaker today. He has touched on many things, but I would like to very, very briefly, as I speak on this matter for a brief intervention, to touch on some matters that Monk also referred to. Now, as far as independence is concerned, because that reminds me to welcome and say Assalamu alaikum, Ayubowan, and good evening to my sisters and my brothers here. I must mention we have in this gathering a very distinguished gathering today. I'm not for a moment thinking of the number, but the fact that we have opinion makers of the Muslim community gathered here in reasonably large numbers. And I think this meeting is going to have some value for covering some of the matters that are of need to be remembered on this Independence Day. First and foremost, I would like to mention that let us think not in terms of independence from the British that we got in 1948, but let us think more broadly from the point of view of freedom, protecting the freedom of this country from all forces that can damage the territorial integrity, the unity and peace in this country. Venerable Kalkhande Damananda Dev referred to the colonial forces and the rule of those forces in certain countries like India and Sri Lanka. Of course, he drew attention to the positive side of this rather than the negative side, and to take advantage of the positive side. If we are to look a little more deeply into this matter, you will find that have we actually worked seriously to get freedom for our country, or were we inspired by the greater struggle, a very intensive, massive, organized effort that we saw in India, led by that great leader Mahatma Gandhi, who led a great non-violent struggle against the British forces to free India and liberate India from what was called the colonial dominance of India. Of course, we were also, I think, inspired by that struggle. But we had our own leaders who worked for it. I would like to mention straight away that as early as 1983, that's about nearly 60 years before 1883, nearly 60 years before independence, distinguished persons like Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam he is being recognized. I'm not a historian, but historians like Professor K.M.D. Silva have recognized one of those earliest leaders of our country who agitated for wider representation for the people of this country in the portals of power. At that time we had the Legislative Council, but all appointments had been made by the governor, and it was all comprised of governor's nominees right from 1833 down to the time when Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam was an active bureaucrat. He was not a politician. He was not leading his community. He was speaking for the entire country that this country should have, if you are taxing the people, there should be equal representation of the people in the legislative body and not necessarily nominated by the governor. Soon thereafter, this was somewhere around 1908, Sir James Pieris joined him, and then we find Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam also coming into the picture. But by that time, we had a Muslim representative who was in that council. If I might mention even by name, the first of them was MC Abdul Rahman, who was appointed 1889. But he was also one of the nominees of the governor. We were essentially a business community. Our contribution and role at that time is being mentioned by other historians, including reviews like Dr. Jamil, had been minimal. Having recognized that, I would like to draw attention to certain factors. Our respected priest mentioned the fact that India was very much disunited until the British came and foreign forces came and became one country called India. In fact, if you see the history, during the period where it was not united, the Cholas, the Pandyans, who were controlling different parts of India, throughout the history we find they have been invading Sri Lanka. They have brought Sri Lanka and parts of Sri Lanka under their control. So what are the blessings of British? From the perspective that I am getting from the respected monk is that unity of India was brought in by British, and it has a very strong advantage, very significant benefit to our country. How? If it was disunited, there could be continuous invasions of our country, which we saw until the Portuguese arrived. But with one single India, the danger of such invasion gets far removed. Of course, it does not mean that a very powerful, a disproportionately powerful India can also be a threat if we do not keep good relationship with that country, notwithstanding how it may treat its citizens. Similarly with China, China's citizens may be treating their citizens differently, including the Muslims in that country, including the Muslims in India. But it is more important that we have good relationships with all these countries if we are to safeguard our own freedom in this country. I feel that it is very important that we consider the fact that our leaders have also struggled for freedom. But my topic that was given for me was, what is the contribution of the Muslim community of Sri Lanka towards this struggle of the freedom? I'm not referring to the struggle for freedom, but for maintaining freedom. if you look back at history, there are historians who have written on this matter. I would like to mention the names of Dr. Lorna Devaraja, who have written a very clear, concise book on 1,000 years of Muslim Sinhala amity in this country. Inspired, I believe, by former Minister A.C.S. Hamid, this book was written. There is also Professor K.M. De Silva, another respected historian, as well as Professor Sinima Kiribamulu, who have written extensively on our history. I am just quoting from a few of what they have referred to, because it is important that on this occasion at least, and more often than on other occasions as well, to remember what contribution we and our forefathers have made for this country. I did mention about these invasions from India. We have also had invasions during the last 5 centuries before we got freedom in this country. The Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British, you know very well. And those forces were controlling this country, and the moment we got freedom, there was an absolute need for revivalism. Revival of not only Buddhism, revival of Hinduism, revival of Islam as well. Certain tensions have had arisen by a misunderstanding with regard to the manner in which we have presented our case as well. I would only like to say, if you go back to this history of over 1,000 years, of all these invasions, there has never been an invasion from any Muslim country to this country. That is something that we should remember with gratitude, so that no one can say that we came here as invaders. We did not come. I'm referring to the Muslims of that time who came. The Arabs, thereafter Muslims, they came as traders, and it's a well-known fact. Nobody can allege that any of this. Not that they did not have the opportunity to invade. They did have. They were in command of the sea. Ocean was controlled by Muslim merchants. Some states, even in India, were also ruled by petty Muslim leaders. I'm calling the word petty because they were not controlling a big part of India. Zuhair of Calicut is one. None of them invaded Sri Lanka. They had military force as well. Zuhair of Calicut had forces. He had an army. He never invaded. But he ruled that area where he was. Why I am saying is that the most significant factor is there had never been an invasion by any Muslim country, though there was the opportunity to do so. But they came as traders, they lived as traders, and then they actually settled down here. They did not come and plunder the wealth, take it to capitals of their countries, and build their countries. There is no evidence of such thing. All the wealth that they earned, they spent here. One of the big examples is our own Nalimajar of our period. All what he earned, he reinvested here. But even at that time, I am referring to the ancient, before the invasion of colonial countries like Portuguese, all the investments that they made in their business were reinvested here. There is no evidence that they had taken, but they were in control of trade. Their vessels were coming. They were bringing clothing and other items, and they took away for trade purposes and got better markets for our products. Now, having said that, did we also not contribute to other areas. I will just in a very brief manner refer to historian again, Lorna Devaraj. She passed away 2 or 3 years ago. She had done an excellent research. She's a historian. And she says the first Arabs who came, 5th century, when King Datusena was ruling this country, he built many webers. One of the biggest webers was the Yoda weber, researched by British author Sir Johnston. He says, and that is quoted by Dr. Lorna Devaraja, that weber was effectively functioning for 300 years, and he is giving credit to the Muslim merchants who made effective contribution for the construction of the web. The point that I am making is, they were not mere traders. They also contributed to the development of this country for food production. Now, this is how many years ago? Even before Islam came, the Arabs, the initial Arab traders, in the 5th century. But subsequently, if you go into this history, and I am sure it is important that some of those who are from the university do some specialized research in this field. You have some good historians who have already written on this subject. These are available in book form, including a book by Dr. Shukri, who has written a very important collection of writings by various historians, including Professor K.M. De Silva. All these are there in his book. I would implore our young sisters who are here and the brothers who are from the university to do some further research on that. Because during the 7th, 8th and 9th centuries, Muslims who were here were settling down here, having, they say, married to Sri Lankans. And they had, I do not know the authority of this, but that is how the historians have presented this matter. Thereafter you will find in the 12th century there is reference to even a handloom, knitting factory being set up with workers brought from India by the Muslims. Now this is referred to by Professor Kiripapuna in her thesis. Now thereafter you will find even in the 13th century Marco Polo, who is an Italian explorer, who refers to during that time that Muslims were employed when he came to Sri Lanka. They were employed in the security establishment of the kings. In other words, they had the highest trust of the rulers of that time. Now the point that I am making is, we have lost some trust later, but to some extent, because we have deviated from our own principles. We should accept that. But at the same time, it is important for us to mention that I think our respected Buddhist monk referred to the Sitavaka. That was the time King Mayadunna was ruling that country. You will remember, during his time, according to this historian, King Mayadunna was resisting the invasion by the Portuguese, though unsuccessful, probably because they had all the weapons and ammunitions and the very powerful equipments, explosives. But still he fought. Whereas there was another king, his brother, who changed his religion and joined with the Portuguese. So the battle was between the Portuguese and the Sinhalese, led by the king. I do not want to mention his name because he has changed his name. And then on the other side, by Mayadunna. And who were the people who fought with Mayadunna? It is the Muslims. Muslims invited and got down, with the permission of the king, troops from Zabarin of Calicut, who sent his military not to invade but to defend this country. And that was led by 3 generals, all of whom got executed at the hands of the British. The point that I am making is, That is one instance of where the Muslims had defended the territorial integrity of the country, though it was clear that they did not have the wherewithal to fight back. It is like the Palestinians resisting the Israelis. Anyhow, colonialism had taken over 500 years, 450 years of our period of life. During this period, of course, there were benefits like road development, education, administration and all that. But the point that I wish to now come to is, do we remember that having contributed to the integrity of this country in many ways, I have only given a few examples. All along we have been doing this. We'll come to the modern period. Even during the fight for freedom, it is well known that leaders like Dr. T.B. Jaya, they also were our leaders from virtually 1924 when he was first elected to the Mohammedan seat together with two others. Thereafter, he was one of the few leaders who continued to be re-elected and continued to speak for the community. Though there were others who were from the business community, who were also equally helpful to the advancement of the community and the unity amongst communities in this country. They did a lot of good work, but they have been looked at as persons who did not speak for the community or for the country. Now, at that time, Dr. T.B. Jaya and them did not speak for our community. They were speaking for the country. Sir Ponnambalam Arunachalam also spoke for the country. He did not speak for the Tamil community at that time. Sir James Peary spoke for the country. Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan also spoke for the country. Though we know he went into 1915 after the minor incident in Gampala where there was a rift or conflict between the Sinhalese and Muslims of that area. He went and spoke in Whitehall, not White House. Whitehall is in the UK. He did not speak against the Muslims. He spoke of the oppression of the British forces on the Sinhala people. If you and I were there, we should have also joined him. This is what I am saying. Because oppression of the Sinhala people hurts us. He spoke. Today what is happening in Palestine? We see similar oppression of a much, much more scandalous scale, with very few people to speak. We are very glad South Africa has come forward to take on that. We have with us some very distinguished journalists also, and others who are here. Many of them had focused the attention of the world on these issues, and we are very grateful to them, and this may be an opportunity for me to even recognize that. I only want to mention that even after independence, we had the 1962 coup. Sri Lankans, from a particular strong minority, attempted to overthrow the government. Now, if you ask me as a lawyer, what is the most serious offense known to law? Overthrow the government. I think I'm taking too much time. Sorry, I'd like to conclude very soon. Right? During that period, what is the most important, most serious one? Is the overthrow of the government unlawfully, illegally, or through violence. The charges are in the penal code, death. Even terrorism, there is no death punishment. Why I am saying that is 1962 coup or the 1971 insurrection by Sinhala youths. 1979, 80, again we 89, 90 by Sinhala youths to topple governments forcibly through violence. Did we do that? Why I'm comparing now is, we have now been forced to sometimes think in terms of Muslims, though we like to think as Sri Lankans. How are we being forced? I read an article by our venerable Buddhist monk here with us, who wrote a good article in 2022. I have got it in my envelope there. I thought I will just remind our president, the very important article he has contributed by way of an interview. How some people were misdirected to have sermons criticizing the Muslim community. Now, I should not be talking this on this platform. This is not the occasion for that. But there had been forces which had tried to create unnecessary animosity to a community which had been most patriotic. In other words, our contribution had been right along patriotic contribution for the good and the welfare of the country. We never had any struggle to overthrow the government. What we had in Easter attack, if we were to mention that, long before the Easter attack, there were several incidents, starting from 2011. When the war was over in 2009, Norway had a big part in that behind the scenes. And when in 2012 onwards, there was an unfortunate continuous attack on the minority Muslim community by a particular group who had been brainwashed by Norway. When they were in Norway, from Norway having brainwashed, because I am saying it with authority because I had attended that very same institute where this brainwashing took place, and they were attempting to do that in my presence as well. I am witness to that. They have their own interest. He's also exporter of weapons, Norway, to Europe. And then I would like to, before I conclude, mention that we, on all occasions, including Easter Sunday attack, it was not an attempt to overthrow a government, but it was a serious dent in our relationship. We all condemn that. The entire community condemned that, everybody condemned that without exception. And years before that, we gave the reasons. This radicalization that some people had started is radicalizing the community, and this was pointed out to the powers that be. The Presidential Commission highlighted that. It said that certain majority community organizations and individuals had contributed to this situation where Muslims had been involved. So I'm not trying to justify. That is wrong, and we still today condemn the Easter Sunday attack. What I am saying is a patriotic community which has had no attempt to overthrow the government, no attempt to have any serious issue, is being forced by a few radical elements who, if you go into that matter alone, in that particular year, that is 2018, 18 mosques had been damaged. These things do have an effect. What do we achieve by that? 18 mosques. I can give you the entire list of the names of all the people, and they were all arrested, but they were not indicted the way the Muslims were indicted. Indicted at a trial at bar, right? But we were not. Those others who attacked the 18 mosques, so many people were arrested, no cases, nothing. Now, what I am saying is, it is very important that we tell the majority community, the Tamils and the other communities, that we are not a threat as being portrayed by some people. We are a peace-loving community. A few radical elements have been radicalized by what happened prior to that. We only wish, as the respected monk said, that we could live in peace, harmony, together in unity with all the communities. Just to conclude, even in the 33-year war, that was a war where the Muslims were not involved. That was a war to divide the country. During that 33 years, because the Muslims of the Northeast did not support The LTT, in its struggle to separate this country, Muslims were driven out from the north. They are still living outside. Some of them have not been even resettled up till now. In mosque, 147 Muslims were killed while we were at prayer. Similarly, 33 Buddhist monks were killed. Why I am reminding all this is, it may not be the occasion to do that, but we should remember that Muslims never did such a thing in this country to anybody, except this Easter Sunday attack incident. But Easter incident is being portrayed as a massive calamity. Go to Palestine, you will know what is oppression, what is humiliation, what is genocide. We have been very peaceful. A minor incident like the 1915 riots, or an equally serious but more important, unaccepted incident like the Easter Sunday attack cannot stand in the way of our unity, of our support for one united Sri Lanka. I only wish to conclude by saying that it is important that we remind, whenever the opportunity arises, our contribution to this country and as a patriotic force, and how we respect all the communities in this country, and we wish to live in unity and peace, because we are essentially a peaceful community of very, very small in number. Thank you very much. May Allah bless you all. Thank you.